Let's talk about the age of Aquarius, a time of great awakening and a time of great reveals. This video is part 3 of my crash course on spirituality, where I discuss everything you need to know about what spirituality actually is and what lies beyond our physical existence. In this part 3, I will be talking about the current moment in time that we are in according to the stars and how that is influencing and informing our collective awakening, the age of Aquarius. And of course, this is more my area of expertise now because I am a professional astrologer. So we're looking at the stars to see what we can expect for humanity moving forward. Like I discussed in part 2 of this series, we are currently at a moment in time when that veil is becoming thinner for everyone. The veil of our physical body, the veil of our physical limitations, it is thinning now. And that means we are all awakening to our true spiritual nature. That's why spirituality is becoming such a trend now, why it's becoming such an aesthetic, why astrology is becoming so popular, and why conspiracy theories are exploding. It all has to do with the fact that we are all awakening, and this age is being ushered in through the age of Aquarius. This new era is going to bring in a completely different paradigm. It's like a completely different operating system. The theme is definitely out with the old and in with the new. And today I will be discussing all of these points. First, let's start off by asking the basic question at hand. What is the age of Aquarius? How do we define it? The age of Aquarius is an astrological age or era that is set to span approximately 2,000 years. It's more like 2,150 years to be a little more exact, but it is essentially this long period of time when humanity's collective focus will be on the themes of Aquarius. Astrology measures time through these approximately 2,000 year cycles that we call the Great Ages here. You can see here the dates are approximate, but this is still a good visualization tool. Each Great Age, as you can see, is named after a zodiac sign, like Aquarius or Capricorn or Sagittarius. Of course, you guys know there are 12 zodiac signs, so multiply 12 signs by 2,150 years, or the span of a great age, and you get 25,800 years, or the span of one great year. Now remember this number, 25,800. This is important because it doesn't just come out of nowhere. This number is derived from a mathematical and an astronomical concept called the precession of the equinoxes. Precession is the understanding that the Earth wobbles on its axis as it's traveling throughout space, and this movement changes our position against the constellations each year. As you can see here, this is the Earth, and the Earth rotates around this red axis every day. It is constantly going in this circular type of motion. But this red axis itself slowly moves around in a circle like this. This is called precession. This rotation is the precession. It takes 25,800 years for the axis to complete one full circle, or one precession, or one great year. That's exactly where this number comes from. We are currently at a point in time when the equinox, based on this precessional circle, that equinox is in between the constellations of Pisces and Aquarius, essentially right about here. That's why it is said by astrologers that we are currently in the age of Pisces and slowly moving towards Aquarius. The big question here then, of course, is when will that switch actually happen? When will the age of Aquarius begin? As many of you guys know, astrologers basically disagree as to when the age of Aquarius will officially begin. Like, there's definitely no one consensus. That's mainly because all the constellations are different shapes and sizes. They're definitely not equal in the sky, and some of them even overlap actually, so that leaves a lot of room for interpretation. Some astrologers, they like to make all the constellations equal and make all the ages equal. Others like to stick to the original sizes of the constellations as closely as they can. I will say that the longer term convention is towards the equal size constellations because that is how the ancient astrologers used the stars. So depending on all that, depending on how you draw the boundaries, we will enter the age of Aquarius sometime in between 1900 and 2600 AD. Definitely a big time range, but regardless of the exact date, what we can understand now in 2020 is that we are right in the middle of a transitionary period. We are right in between, somewhere between Pisces and Aquarius. Of course, it's not like great ages. They just flip like a switch overnight. It's not like you wake up one day and everything has changed from Pisces to Aquarius. It takes about 300 to 400 years for us to gradually transition from one age to another. So depending on this time frame, it seems like we are currently right in the middle of that transitionary zone. We are slowly transmuting Pisces energy into Aquarius. And there are actually a lot of clues in our current society that this transition is already happening. One big clue is how our technical advancement as a society has really accelerated in the last 100 years. Aquarius represents technology and invention and modernization, and so the new age is really going to bring about a lot of progress in this area of life. We already see that happening now in society through science and computers, internet, social media. I mean, it's crazy to think how the scientific method was only just popularized in the 20th century. We also see our technologies, our devices, their life cycles are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. All of these are little clues that we are entering, or at least approaching, the age of Aquarius. There are also certain astrological events happening now, currently, that are bringing more Aquarius energy into the collective. For example, there was that very famous new moon solar eclipse in February of 1962 when 6 planets aligned in Aquarius. This event was definitely heralded as the dawning of that age for many astrologers back at the time. And it's just interesting to look back now, and see just how revolutionary the 60s were actually in terms of the Aquarian ideals of liberty, freedom, and individual self-expression. So it does seem like this eclipse kicked off something big there. Then, of course, we have the Great Conjunction in Aquarius coming up on December 21st, 2020. Very, very highly anticipated event, very monumental. One, because it does mark the start of a new 20-year cycle in Aquarius, but also because it marks the start of a new 200-year cycle in the element of air. So very significant in terms of the birth of a new era. If you want to learn more about what that all means, what the Great Conjunction means, and what you can expect from this event, definitely go check out my highlights bubble on Instagram called The Age of Aquarius, because I talk about it way in depth there, and I'm really kind of doing a whole series around this alignment and this energy, so I will link that in the description below. Then, going out a little bit further into the future, we will also see Pluto entering Aquarius in 2023, and that in itself is a huge monumental transit. Pluto takes over 200 years to go all the way around the zodiac, so none of us have actually seen Pluto in Aquarius in our lifetimes. The last time that happened was in the late 1700s, right through the entire American Revolution. So that is the type of people power energy that will be re-entering the collective soon. And as you can see here, Pluto will be in Aquarius for 20 years, from 2023 all the way until 2043. So this Aquarius energy is really going to make up a good chunk of a lot of our lifetimes. The coming years and decades are really going to feel like a mini age of Aquarius, essentially, even if we're not technically there yet in terms of the precession. So now we have an understanding of what the age of Aquarius is, how it's calculated, what precession is. We also understand that we are currently in a transition period between Pisces and Aquarius, as depicted here. We can also see on this chart that we are in the middle of a bigger transition between the dark age and the light age. And this is really important to understand. One gray year is itself broken up into 2 cycles, the dark cycle and the light cycle. And this concept is something that is seen in many ancient traditions and philosophies, like this concept of humanity constantly going back between dark cycles and light cycles. That shows up in Greek philosophy, in Chinese philosophy. It also shows up in Hindu philosophy, the Vedic Indian philosophy of the cycle of the yugas. This is a very similar concept where it shows that humanity goes through a descending cycle and then following by an ascending cycle. Descending cycle followed by an ascending cycle. And at least according to the yugas, we're currently right about here in the bottom of the ascension cycle. You can kind of start to understand here just how powerful this present moment really, really is. Not only are we in between the 200-year cycles of earth and air, like I discussed on Instagram, but we are also in between the 2,000-year cycles of Pisces and Aquarius, and also in between the 13,000-year cycles of dark and light. We are really at this inflection point for society. That is why it is so crucial now for all of us to understand the astrology here, because astrology can essentially give us that roadmap for what to expect and what to leave behind. So let's use the stars to discuss more of these cycles in depth. First, we are currently in the age of Pisces, and Pisces is a very spiritual sign. It is spiritual, it is emotional, it is loving and kind. It is the last sign of the zodiac, so in that sense, it represents death and the act of transcendence, being able to let go of the ego and see beyond ourselves. This energy was really needed for us at the time, at the beginning of the Pisces age, because we had just gotten out of the age of Aries, which was all about the ego, about the individual, the war hero. You can see the age of Aries ended approximately around 0 AD. Again, these dates are approximate, but it's generally agreed upon by astrologers that the Pisces age started around this time. Again, the age of Aries was a time when we were pushed to develop our ego, our pride, our individual power, our individual physical strength. But with all that ego and pride also came war and conflict and domination by brute force, all the shadow sides of Aries. That is why Pisces energy had to start being introduced to the collective. That's why Pisces had to come forth as an emotional water sign to put out some of the aggressive fire of Aries. And Pisces did that by introducing some rather radical ideas for the time. Compassion, empathy, love, universal love, that act of letting go of the ego and seeing beyond ourselves. Pisces also emphasized the values of surrender and sacrifice, the martyr and the saint. Sacrifice is a huge, huge theme with Pisces because, again, Pisces wants to let go of the ego. It wants to transcend, and it wants to do that so badly to the point where it will literally sacrifice itself. It will become the sacrificial lamb. Of course, we see this theme reflected really strongly in the story of Jesus, and it seems that the age of Pisces has really been an age of Christianity. The age, again, started off with the birth of Jesus Christ, and the entire period has been marked by the rise of Christianity and the rise of other great world religions. Christianity itself has really interesting ties to Pisces, like how they both use the symbol of the fish, as you can see here. This being the Christian fish, of course, and this being the two Pisces fish that always swim in continuum. Christianity also emphasizes feet washing as a ritual, and that's just interesting because Pisces specifically rules the feet, so many cool ties there. Again, the age of Pisces has really been marked by the age of Christ and other great world religions. Religious figures like Jesus and others, they paved the way forward to show the best of what Pisces could be. The best of compassion, the best of universal love, the best of selfless sacrifice. But of course, slowly over time, as it goes for any age, the ideals and values of Pisces, they started getting inverted, basically. They started getting used for things that were against its primary intent. The Pisces values of spiritual love and compassion started getting misused and started eroding into a very dark caricature of what it once was. What I'm talking about here, of course, is religion. How religion has been subverted from its original intent of universal love into an inversion and a caricature of itself to be used more for domination and control. Gigi Young, she's an amazing spiritual teacher here on YouTube. I'm sure many of you guys already know her, but she has a great line where she says, Christianity becomes churchianity. And I feel like that line summarizes this whole shift so well. Religion has went from Christianity into churchianity. It has become a tool for control. It has become the opiate of the masses. Of course, I'm not talking about all religion or all churches by any means, but really just more of the primary ones and institutions that seem to dominate society. Pisces really emphasize the importance of faith and belief and devotion, but the shadow side of that devotion is then delusion and deception. This downward shift is really something that happens with every age. I want to make that clear. Each age does have a higher side and a lower side. The higher side, of course, shows the best of what an age can be, the best of Pisces, the best of universal love. And then the lower side, of course, shows the worst of what that age can be, the worst of Pisces, which would be more like spiritual manipulation and deception. That is why we need the age of Aquarius to come in now to create a new paradigm and re-empower society. Aquarius is all about individual sovereignty, and its highest expression is freedom and individual liberty. Essentially, I think the transition from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius can be summarized in two mantras: I believe versus I know. I believe is, of course, a Pisces mantra because it really reinforces the importance of faith, of having trust in something. This was really important for us at the time as a collective because we all had to learn that we are not just our own egos and we can all transcend ourselves. But of course, the shadow side is that of that mantra is then, who do you believe? Who do you have faith in? Or can you trust the people who tell you what books to read or what books not to read or what to practice or what not to practice? What happens when you can't trust the people telling you that information? That is why the Aquarius mantra of I know is such a revolution and such a game changer, because it means we don't have to have power or belief in someone else anymore. It means we do not need to rely on power structures or institutions or leaders. We don't need to listen to other people anymore. We can break free and become empowered to find the guru within ourselves, to find our own inner knowing. We can become empowered to find our own sovereignty. Again, Aquarius' ultimate goal is individual freedom and liberation. So the upcoming age of Aquarius, this is really the time to find the light within ourselves, to find our own truth. During this process of discovering our own truth, we will naturally start to remember that we are each personally connected to God or to source energy. We start to remember that God is not this patriarchal representation that has been, created by flawed men, but it is something much more light, much more fluid, much more energetic, and in that way, it is much more us. We don't need a priest or a church or organization telling us what to believe or how to believe anymore. We already have everything we need inside each of us. We each have a part of God inside of us, and we are each a part of God ourselves. This is what it truly means to come into the light age, to come into the overarching trend of the next 13,000 years as we move through the procession. We as humanity, we are coming into a time when we are remembering our spiritual side. We're remembering the fact that we are all spiritual beings, not just psychics, not just mediums or Miss Cleo, We are each spiritual beings, and we all have the ability to see spirit or to see things clairvoyantly or to get info telepathically or travel in the astral realm, anything else our spiritual gifts allow us to do. This is an innate part of our human nature. We are spiritual creatures by design, and being spiritual is almost even more human than being technological or being scientific, because this connection to God, it comes from within ourselves. This is the knowledge that the Dark Ages essentially took away from us. Of course, we have been in the Dark Age for quite some time now, and that is usually a time when it is very difficult to connect to spirit. During a Dark Age, it becomes very difficult to express our spiritual side and to vibrate on that higher level. We even forget that we are all connected to all things. We are now coming into a natural point in our collective evolution when We start to remember what we have forgotten. Again, I want to emphasize, we are remembering who we truly are. We're not discovering something new. We are just remembering what the dark ages took away from us. During a light age, the veil becomes thinner and it becomes naturally easier to connect. We start bringing in more light energy onto the earth. We start entering a golden era. And again, I want to emphasize here that this is a natural evolution that is bound to happen. Astrology teaches us that time is cyclical. Everything moves around in cycles. Humanity always cycles between a dark age and a light age, and we're just at the point where we are entering the light now. So with that understanding, we know that we need to start moving away from the dark side of life, moving away from the dark side of Pisces. So this is the time to each move away from people who say, I have all the answers. I can tell you the word of God. Instead, it is a time to start moving towards the people who say that I will help you find the answers for yourself, who empower you to find your own answers. This is the time to move away from people who use religion as a tool for control. This is also the time to move away from people who use religion for darkness and evil and black magic. That is the shadow side of Pisces. Now, I know this specifically is a very scary topic that most people don't want to think about, but I believe it is very, very important to address here because we as a collective, we need to face our shadows in order to move into the light. It doesn't just happen without effort. We each need to put in the work to face our shadows, to bring out the darkness, to bring our skeletons out of the closet in order for us to heal, in order for us to have enough space for the light to come in. And that means, of course, we need to start talking about these things. We need to start talking about the darkness that exists in our society. The shadow side of Pisces is religion used for evil. It is sacrifice used for evil. It is black magic. It is spiritual manipulation through satanic practices. It is also the projection of fantasy, the projection of confusion, and just a general sense that what you see is not what you get. So we have to understand that this is where we're currently at now as a society. What you see out there is not what you get when it comes to our countries, our governments, our politics, our leaders. Like everything is an inversion of itself. And basically, that's what we should expect when it comes to being at the end of the age of Pisces. That's what we should expect when it comes to being at the end of the dark age. We should expect to be in a society where we see people like Jeffrey Epstein getting arrested and then killed for trafficking children to politicians and celebrities. We should expect to see Catholic priests everywhere getting arrested for pedophilia. We should expect to see the one percenters doing really weird, creepy rituals like this here in California. This is what we should all expect to see happening. And this black magic, it is really all hidden in plain sight. Again, Gigi Young, she has a fantastic YouTube series on this specifically where she does a deep dive into all of the dark occult that is really practiced in plain sight in society. So I will absolutely link that below. I know this particular subject is very hard to approach because it is quite political, or at least it's political here in America. It's very polarized. I know it's also seen as very conspiratorial as well, and I totally get it. Like, all of this was so crazy to me and so hard for me to get into when I first started, but even if it goes against our worldview, even if it goes against everything we understand and believe about society, this is the hard, challenging, frustrating work that we need to be doing now as a collective in order to move into the light. We need to be willing to face our shadows, to root out the darkness, root out the evil, and make room for the light to come in. That is the only way that we can be elevated enough for us to advance as a civilization. So with all that said, I will end this video by talking a little bit more about what we can expect for the rest of the age of Aquarius. Its peak and fall before, of course, we enter the age of Capricorn. So first, like I said before, Aquarius is the sign of technology and invention and just everything new. So we can definitely expect to see massive changes in that area for the next 2,000 years. Of course, it's like we can expect that regardless of any age, but it's at least interesting to think about how this Aquarian age will be characterized by a constant stream of newness, like a constant state of change and of cycling. And its technologies will also be completely different than any age before it. So the main thing here, I think, is that essentially science will merge with spirituality. Like, I think they will be seen as two sides of the same coin instead of them trying to fight each other. Like, hopefully science itself will become much less reductionist, like much less about what we can measure through our physical senses, which of course is limiting. And science will eventually support spirituality and eventually support the existence of source energy or God, instead of fighting them. With that, I think we will create technology powered by our consciousness, powered by our minds. People call this consciousness-assisted technology. So I think we will be able to do things with our minds, like being able to type, to social media or open files or operate a computer. Like, hopefully other cooler things than that, but along those lines. I also think we will be able to travel and teleport with our minds as well, because our understanding of time and the nature of it will be expanded as we move up into the light age. So time travel might definitely become a thing. In general, I think we will move more into a state of being where we operate off of a group consciousness rather than so much individual consciousness. Again, Pisces is a water sign, so it really emphasizes like feelings and emotions, our own feelings, our own emotions, like our own pains. But Aquarius is totally different because Aquarius is an air sign and they are known for being very much more unemotional, like more detached, more objective and rational, while also still being very group oriented. So I do think we will move into a phase where we are much less focused on our own problems, our own emotions, and because of that, we can then more easily meld with the minds of other people. I think the human body will become much more integrated with technology, like hopefully not in this creepy transhumanist way, but more in a loving and spiritual way based on energy and vibrations. I think energy in general will be much more understood, and it will be understood and accepted how we each have an energetic body along with having a physical body. Medicine will also follow in this direction, taking on more of a focus on holistic healing, on mindful healing, energetic healing, rather than pharmaceuticals. I also think we will create forms of artificial intelligence. Hopefully what I'm thinking though is like not in a scary or creepy robotic way as it seems now, but more in this like living, breathing, biological way, if that makes any sense. Like, I don't know exactly what I'm picturing, but I do feel like we will have AI that is much more of like a living, breathing thing rather than creepy, scary robots. Also, I do think we will be interacting more with outer space and extraterrestrials, of course, because Aquarius literally rules ET and UFO. So I do see us as a civilization over the next hundreds of years becoming more comfortable with ETs, more comfortable working with them, more comfortable like understanding, the different species that exist. And then hopefully eventually taking a greater role, active role in sort of like the Galactic Federation of species and like all the other planets that govern our universe. So hopefully seeing us become much more universal beings, not just earthly beings. Again, Aquarius is all about community and forming groups, and we're going to be forming groups outside of ourselves, not just bound to ourselves. Our consciousness in general will expand to understand and assimilate the fact that there are really other species and other planets besides our own, like other dimensions besides our own, even other timelines besides our own. And that is all not to be feared, not something scary. It is actually really fun and opens up so many more portals of possibilities. Now, in terms of society and like how we will function as individuals, the main thing I can say here is that we will definitely no longer be ruled by hierarchy anymore, like by top-down pyramid structures. Aquarius is all about people being on an equal footing. Like, it's all about decentralization, so there's really no one center of power. We are moving towards a society where our governments and our countries, our schools, our businesses will be much more flat, like much more collectivist and more group-oriented rather than hierarchical. We will also form different communities than the ones we are used to seeing now, as I mentioned. Perhaps more intergalactic communities, but also probably more communities based around shared intellectual ideas and interests, rather than the traditional ones we're used to now by, let's say by country or by race. Now, Aquarius here is really interesting because it is somewhat contradictory as a sign. On one hand, Aquarius does rule community and fellowship, brotherhood and sisterhood, but it also rules freedom and individual liberty and, being authentic to ourselves. So how do those two mesh? The lesson to be learned here with Aquarius is that when we actually allow people to be free and to be liberated and actually do what they want, we can all get along better together as a group. We can actually get along better when we acknowledge and embrace our differences. We can form groups where we respect each other's differences and we respect boundaries while still working towards a common goal. We can manage ourselves, we can regulate ourselves just fine without the need for hierarchy, institutions, authority, prison systems, things like that. This will be the golden age of Aquarius, when everyone is equal and everyone has something special to add to society. It will be when we form small, self-regulating communities and groups that harness technology to make our lives better, basically, and to help us become more spiritual, instead of the opposite, where they're trying to enslave us and trying to make us disconnect from our spiritual side. So that is what we have to look forward to, at least in spirit. But of course, over the decades, years, centuries, the age of Aquarius will naturally start to wind down as it inverts from its original values into the shadow side. Aquarius at its best, it's all about the group, it's all about the community. But when that goes too far, then it becomes groupthink and conformity. So we may become so reliant and so focused on, doing everything together, doing everything equally, that we forget to express our individuality and to express our own wants and needs. The flip side of that, again, with Aquarius is then being too individualistic and too much about personal liberty. So when certain people start becoming too group-minded and too focused on the group, there will definitely be another faction of people who essentially completely rebel against that and start going the other way. They will start becoming very individualistic, very separatist, very much a loner, essentially removing themselves from society. Another bad side of Aquarius is that we can be too much about technology and newness and breaking things, and we want no structures and we want no tradition at all. We want to constantly break things and create new things instead of building upon the old. That will eventually lead to a dysfunctional society that isn't grounded in anything, that has no history or no reverence for the past. So that is when we will need the age of Aquarius to sweep back in to help us build things up again, to help us build structures and hierarchy and some kind of order or logic to the world, so that we can reintegrate meaning and purpose to society again. Okay, guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope it was helpful and that you guys were able to learn something about time cycles. Again, if you want to learn more about Aquarius energy, about the Great Conjunction and everything that's coming up in the future, please check out this highlights bubble on my Instagram called Age of Aquarius. I'm collecting all of my relevant content and information there. And of course, please stay tuned for the final part of this series on spirituality, part 4. And this one will be very helpful because I will give more practical tips on how you can connect personally better to your spiritual side and to your subconscious mind. So still lots more to talk about, but until then, I will talk to you guys later. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.